Good afternoon. My name is Stephanie Hull. I'm class of 1988 and an interim president of the Wellesley College Alumni Association Board. We are so grateful to everyone who's here for reunion and joining us for this special panel of distinguished alumni who have served as college and university presidents. This is a great moment to celebrate the culmination of Wellesley's 150th anniversary year. What an incredible milestone. As part of this afternoon's panel on the future of higher education, it is my honor to introduce the panelists and our moderator. I'd like to start by introducing the 14th president of Wellesley College, Paula A. Johnson. Many here today know President Johnson well. Many have been inspired by her distinguished and groundbreaking career in academic medicine, including her profound impact on women's health. Many are proud of her work as a respected and deeply thoughtful higher education leader, especially at this time of challenge and change. And as alumni, many here today know how President Johnson has transformed Wellesley, led the institution through unprecedented times, and lifted women's education to new heights. I'm especially proud of how President Johnson has strengthened Wellesley's commitment to educate civically minded, globally prepared students. She has advanced STEM education and has made Wellesley more outward-facing as it works to elevate the college's mission to advance the status of women and girls around the world. Next is Nannerl Overholser Keohane, class of 1961. Class of 1961 and Wellesley's 11th president. Her tenure included the construction of the Keohane Sports Center, which opened in 1985, and the establishment of the Davis Museum and Cultural Center. President Keohane also led the most ambitious fundraising campaign in the history of American private higher education at the time, and she strengthened Wellesley's commitment to equity by enhancing affirmative action programs and increasing both student and faculty diversity. In 1993, she became the 13th president of Duke University, becoming the first woman in the modern era to lead both a major women's college and a major research university. Next is Alecia A. DeCoudreaux, class of 1976, and the president. You need to hear the panel. Let me get through the introductions. The President Emerita of the former Mills College, now known as Mills College at Northeastern University. President DeCoudreaux led Mills for 5 years as its first Black female president from July 2011 through June 2016, during which Mills became the first single-sex college in the United States to adopt an admission policy explicitly welcoming transgender students. Prior to that, President DeCoudreaux spent 30 years as a pharmaceutical executive and attorney. She has also served on a number of charitable, educational, and for-profit and nonprofit boards, including as both a trustee and board chair at Wellesley College. Finally is Diana Chapman Walsh, class of 1966, and the 12th president. The 12th president and president emerita of Wellesley. During her presidency, the college's curriculum was revised to emphasize interdisciplinary learning, global education, internships, and service learning. New majors were introduced in fields including environmental studies, neuroscience, cinema and media studies, astrophysics, and quantitative reasoning, and new language programs in Japanese, Arabic, and Korean were launched. In addition, President Walsh helped the college raise more than $700 million, quadruple its endowment to over $1.6 billion, and saw applications rise by 42%. In recognition of her enduring impact, the renovated Alumnae Hall, where you are now sitting, was named Diana Chapman Walsh Alumnae Hall in her honor. The discussion will be moderated by Robin Sparkman, class of 1991, and CEO. And CEO of ProPublica. ProPublica is the largest investigative newsroom in the country and the winner of 9 Pulitzer Prizes. Prior to ProPublica, Sparkman was the founding CEO of nonprofit media organization StoryCorps, and previously she spent more than 2 decades as a reporter and editor at Newsweek, MSNBC, and American Lawyer. Today's discussion will explore the evolving challenges facing higher education and reaffirm the enduring value of a liberal arts education in shaping future leaders. Thank you to those of you who submitted questions in advance. I'm looking forward to hearing what these luminary leaders have to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. It's a pleasure to be with all of you today and on the live stream, and to sit here with these badass women. Usually when I talk to politicians, they don't get this kind of response. It's heartwarming. So we're going to talk about 2 things today: the role of a liberal arts education in the year of our Lord 2026, and because it's fun and instructive for all of us, we're going to talk about some of the lessons each of the panelists has learned during their respective tenures as university presidents. So I have a lot of questions for these amazing women, but I want to start with a few facts before we begin. I know they brought their own data as well to the panel, because they are Wellesley women. So let me just start here. Overall college enrollment in the United States is projected to decrease significantly over the next decade, the result of declining birth rates and concerns among families that the financial investment in college isn't worth it. And fewer students means fewer tuition dollars coming in. As colleges struggle to pay their bills, some, such as Hampshire College, ultimately close. In fact, more than a quarter of all small private colleges are at risk of closing or having to merge over the next decade, according to a new forecast by Huron Consulting. There are also concerns that AI will make college significantly less valuable or even obsolete. And we've seen the Trump administration attack higher education on a number of fronts. But it is not just a partisan issue, as the panelists know. This spring, Yale University's Committee on Trust in Higher Education released a report saying that overall, there is a sharp decline in public trust in higher education in the US. So I want to start there. I want to talk about the value of a liberal arts education, the kind that's taught on campus here. So I want to start with Paula. What's the value of a liberal arts education in 2026, and why does it matter?
First of all, Robin, thank you for moderating this panel, and I cannot tell you how honored I am to be on this panel with the 3 of you. It is truly a tremendous honor, and you just gave me one of the biggest compliments that I can ask for. You said that they are Wellesley women, and thank you. Honorary. So thank you. But in all seriousness, the value of a liberal arts education, the kind that we actually have on this campus, could not be more important today. If we think about the threats to our democracy, and they are everywhere, and if we think about the technological revolution that we are undergoing, and it is something that is real, the importance of an education that is broad-based, that really teaches our students how to think critically, teaches them what it means to be empathic, teaches them history, and I could go on, is critical. And to have those flexible skills to be able to move into the world being a civically minded citizen, and I don't mean necessarily citizen of the United States, citizen of the world, is what you learn at a place like Wellesley. Now, why is it that we are being questioned? And I think that is one of the big issues that we have to face. I think each of us can talk about the value of the education you received, the value of the education that we provide today. But we are not expressing that in a way that is understood. And that, to me, is one of the biggest challenges, which is the issues that the Yale report brought up around, are our students prepared? Are we just teaching kind of the theoretical as opposed to the practical? Are our students being exposed to a diversity of viewpoints? And what about the cost? So I won't go into all of those now, but these are questions that we have to absorb. We have to really understand what is being asked of us, and we then have to take those questions and be very serious about being critical of what we do and be able to then communicate back to the public. I'm just going to give you one small example. We are need blind. We are so proud of being able to accept our, thank you. And it's because of the work of my predecessors, the work of so many of you, of our boards in the past, that we have a robust endowment and annual fund that provide this type of annual financial aid, over $83 million. When we talk about being need blind, it was a wake-up call to me just a few months ago when I was being interviewed by a Boston Globe reporter who was asking me what were we going to be doing. You know, Smith is providing free tuition for families with under $150,000, which we actually do as well. But I added to that we are need blind, and they said, what is that? So I think I just use that example to say we must learn how to not just talk to each other, but to really make our case and make it powerfully, because we do have a powerful case to make.
Okay, Diana? Yeah.
So I would just add to that. Nora Ephron famously said, I'll have what she had. I'll say what she said. She said she was one of our graduation speakers. I think Wellesley has really a uniquely compelling story to tell about the value of a liberal education, and it's in large part because of the efforts that have been made to pull that together. We heard this morning at the event here just earlier about this report called the Wellesley Effect, in which the Career Center and others have put together an extraordinary study that takes, career outcomes and professional achievements of Wellesley alumni between 1950 and 2024. And it includes comparisons with graduates of more than a dozen other leading colleges and universities. And Wellesley alumni stand out in all the ways we would want them to, in every way we would want them to. And there I turn to my colleague on my right, who led the planning process that produced the mission statement for the college, which was to provide an excellent liberal arts education for women who will make a difference in the world. And that's what's happening, and it goes through these generations. And we've got the goods. We've got the data. This is our data lady, but we've got the goods. We're doing it. And just quickly, a quick partisan purple shout out to my classmate and dear friend Lulu Wong, who wasn't in the balcony earlier. But who is here now? Yes, Lulu. So Lulu, during my presidency, saw and stepped up to fill the need for a glorious campus center. The students were telling us there's no there, where do we go? And she fixed that. And then more recently, she's been instrumental in creating a world-class Career Center. And out of that Career Center has come not only a lot of these data that we're now able to cite, but also a lot of the work that has produced the results that we're able to cite. Clearly, our professors and lots of other people participate, but the foresight to create that Career Center, Lulu, has been tremendously valued. So we've got the value proposition pretty well nailed. You may have some numbers.
No, I'm not gonna do numbers on this one because we have lots of questions and lots of things to talk about. I will be very brief, even though this question deserves a very long and thoughtful answer. I think a liberal arts education has always provided a breadth of context for our experience by making us familiar with the works of human beings, with the wonders of nature, with the fantastic record of history, all the things a liberal arts education does. It's doing now. But in addition, one other thing that a liberal arts education does, which is more important now than ever, is to hone your ability to analyze a problem, to know how to take it apart, figure out where an answer is likely to be found, judge the worth of the answer, know how to assess evidence. And in this world where we've got misinformation, disinformation, and generative AI giving us images that never existed, it seems to me analytical intelligence is perhaps the most important skill that a liberal arts education can provide. I think it's
Yeah.
I like to think of it as the better, well, I'm a fan of many things about artificial intelligence, not all, but I think of it as a different AI, analytical intelligence, and that's what we're going to provide.
Alecia.
So my perspective on this is slightly different. And it's different because Mills College was so very different than Wellesley. Not different in the sense that it was a women's college when I was there. But the women who came to Mills were often known as women with broken wings. And they came to Mills and they were healed. They came to Mills and they were respected for their brains, for their intelligence, for what they were doing. They all, like Wellesley women, were interested in making a difference in the world. Many of them had full-time jobs while they were at Mills. Several of them started nonprofit organizations while they were at Mills. A number of them lived out of their cars while they were at Mills. And yet they found themselves in an environment where they felt like they belonged, where they were encouraged, where they were supported, they were mentored. They found themselves, they found their voices, much as we have done and as I did when I was at Wellesley, but under very, very different circumstances. And I think the value for them of being in a women's college was that they knew that they could make it because they had so many people supporting them. They had faculty, much like the Wellesley faculty, who provided them with extra office hours, who provided them with all sorts of accommodations. And I think that's one of the valuable assets that you find in a women's college. You find faculty who will go the extra mile for you. And that was particularly important in a place where every single day of my time there, we were talking about whether or not we'd be able to keep the doors open.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. So Diana, when we spoke a few weeks ago and talked about this question about the value of a liberal arts education, you used the phrase that really stuck with me, it's so visual, athletic listening. So what is that, and why is that so important when you think about a liberal arts education, particularly a place like Wellesley?
So, funny, I did say that. I kind of said it in passing, I think. I didn't think much about it. And once you picked up on it, I thought, I better think a little more about that. Where did that come from? And I think it might have been Nikki Tanner. You knew Nikki. She always enjoyed turning a phrase, and she described me that way one day. Diana, you're an athletic listener. So what does that mean? What it signifies in my mind is a kind of embodied listening. It has a kind of physicality to it. It's a full presence as a listener. There's a kind of leaning in, breathing consciously, slowing down, resisting the impulse to be formulating the next response, holding that at bay, and sort of being conscious of being in a whole fluid social field. to which the best word I can think of is the word that's often used to describe moments of really intense connection, the word flow. So this feeling of flow in this listening process. And it requires this sense of being aware of your body and as you're listening with your mind, this sort of combination. So why is listening important at a place like Wellesley? That was the second half of it. Quite simply because we're a community that learns from each other. And as I learned and have written, the voices from the margin very often carry the buried wisdom that is needed by the larger whole. I can't tell you the number of times that a group would come to me, a group that hadn't had a chance to be heard on a larger stage, and they'd bring me something that absolutely needed my attention. So a trustworthy leader, and I've thought a lot about what that is, needs to hear those quieter voices, needs to take them in even in this physical way, and reflect back to them that they've been heard and seen and felt and respected. So I think that's the essence of it.
That is so critical to leadership, to all of our leadership. And it's also such an essential component of our liberal arts education, and something that we've been very much focused on teaching our students as a skill. Because in order to actually understand the complexity, in order to understand another viewpoint, you do have to have that athletic listening. And it's not something that necessarily comes naturally, particularly in our world today, where so much of our students' interaction is online, it is fast, in which information is being digested, pre-digested, and given, as opposed to really fully understanding. So I so agree, and it is the work that we have been deeply engaged in.
May I build on that for just a second?
Yeah.
One of the things that I learned coming out of corporate America, where we spent so much time thinking about the importance of the shareholder voice, and it took us a while, but in corporate America we finally learned that we needed to be listening to all stakeholder voices. The same, I think, is true in academia. And within academia, where we have shared governance, we're rather accustomed to the role of the board, the role of the administration, the role of the faculty. But I learned while I was at Mills how extraordinarily important it was to listen to the students as well. And I found that listening to them was best done when they found me walking along the campus and felt comfortable in talking to me. The same was true for the faculty. They rarely spoke up in large settings, other than to be critical. But in other settings, they would really tell you what was on their minds, and they would often offer up thoughts and ideas about how to address some of the issues that they weren't comfortable in speaking about in a faculty meeting, for example, or students weren't comfortable in speaking about them in a large student setting. But those one-on-one conversations, or those small conversations, so often led to really great ideas that we tried to implement, and therefore demonstrated what you were saying, Diana, that we listened, that we heard what they were saying. And sometimes that's all people want, is to really feel heard and to be heard. And we tried to demonstrate that. But it was interesting to finally then bring students and faculty and administrators and board members together for a conversation. And that was where real listening, I think, made a huge difference in the end.
Okay, so one of the reasons why this issue of a liberal arts education is kind of front and center these days is because of the emerging role of AI affecting all of our society. And Paula, you spoke a little bit about this morning, but the college is grappling with what is the role of AI in terms of educating students and the intersection with AI and a liberal arts education. You want to talk a little more about that?
Sure. I mean, I think that this is one of the biggest questions right now in higher education. And it's multi-layered. So I'll just talk very briefly about some of those different layers. This is happening so quickly that, first of all, to think that we will have the answer is really not the right approach. And that's why liberal arts education is so critical, because it actually gives us the ability to take the framework and think about how to think about it and how to then integrate this technology in a way that it is flexible and forward-looking. So of course, one, we have to recognize that our students are coming to us with a facility with AI that we don't have, or at least for the vast majority of us don't have. So one, we have to learn from them how they're using it and how they're thinking about it. Second, as a technology in and of itself, we're really focused on how do we allow or teach our students and teach ourselves how AI is shaping our future, is shaping the information we're getting, is shaping the way that we think about the world, and is even shaping what is happening in the classroom. Therefore, how information is making it into our curriculum. So that's kind of from a broad perspective, and how to educate our students around what is misinformation, how do you identify misinformation, and how do you think critically, and I think Nan put this really well, analytically, about this technology. So that's one area. Second is, how do we get our faculty comfortable with the technology? There are faculty who are called super users and early adopters who are really thinking about this technology in terms of their fields and disciplines and bringing it then into the classroom in ways that they construct their exercises and problem sets and other aspects. And then there are others who might view it as such an enormous threat that the first response is to avoid it. And so we've spent a couple of years under the leadership of our chair of computer science, brilliant computer scientist, Dorit Scher, and she's been very sensitively leading our faculty through a process that has gotten them, I think, to a wonderful place of excitement about what it means to really think about AI in their fields and disciplines and in their teaching. So I think that's one piece that is moving forward. We have a whole series of faculty fellows in AI, and they are really doing some brilliant work. And then the third area is, how are we preparing our students to enter a world in which AI is part of their day-to-day work, and where jobs, entry-level jobs in particular, are going away? And that's where our amazing Career Center has really been on the cutting edge. Along with the curriculum, what Jen Pollard, who's the Lulu Wao-Chung Executive Director, has done is to create a series of modules that are based in real life. She has worked with a number of employers in different industries to understand how AI is being used in their areas. And we have now created modules that are done in January during winter session, but then again in May, right after commencement, to have our students go through, in essentially, these boot camps. And we do them in a number of areas for skill building. And what it does is it allows us to marry our strong liberal arts education with the skills that are needed to enter the workforce. And that, we believe, is a combination that is absolutely essential for success. And we've been seeing it in terms of the placement of our students in the job market just this summer as we've seen them graduate. So that's just there's more going on, but I would just say that's a synopsis. But it's all about continuous learning and moving forward. And I won't even talk about what we're thinking about with regard to the operations of the college. That's another whole discussion.
Stay tuned. Yeah, okay, great. You are all not just leaders of liberal arts institutions at different points in your career, but you're also role models and to many of us in the room. So I want to ask you to reflect back on your time as a university president, and have some questions for all of you about that. So I'm sort of dying to know, what's one decision you made as a college president that was unpopular at the time, but you look back now and you think you were right? It's a little more fun than AI. Yeah. Alecia, do you want to start?
Decision that I made that wasn't unpopular. But, when I arrived at Mills, it was very clear from the mandate, quite frankly, that I had been given to try and figure out a way to address a structural deficit that we had. And we had been taking 7% out of our endowment. Even during the 2008, during the economic downturn, we were taking an extraordinary amount out of our endowment. And so I set about, along with the trustees and along with a small group, to outline ways in which we might begin to address our deficit. And as you might imagine, making some cuts was included in that. I started with my salary, and then we made cuts in terms of salaries. We made some cuts in terms of staff. And it was all with the view toward reducing our dependence in such a significant way on our endowment so that we could begin to also think about the future of the organization. We were spending so much time talking about how to save it, but we also wanted to be able to think about how we might have a future. And that required not only raising additional funds, but cutting. And those cuts were about as unpopular as they could possibly have been. But I continue to believe, and my successor believed, that it was the right decision at the time. You may know that we were just about to close our doors when Northeastern came along and actually acquired the college. But between the time that I left and 5 years, 6 years later, that structural deficit had doubled. And we knew that if we didn't address it, that is what would happen. And unfortunately, that is what happened. And so Mills College is no longer a women's college. It is among the many. When I was here at Wellesley, there were over 200 women's colleges. Today, there are 30 or fewer. And Mills, unfortunately, is one of the colleges that is no longer solely for women.
Okay, Nan.
So I would choose a decision that I made at Duke, in fact, in about 2002, I think. It wasn't that it was unpopular, but it was highly controversial. With some people, it was more than unpopular, it was horrifying. And with others, it was just exactly what we needed to do. And that was the decision to allow gay marriage in Duke Chapel. I don't know how much you all know about So I have to give you a bit of background if you don't know the campus. The chapel is the center of this glorious Gothic chapel, and it's a very popular site for marriages. And people sign up. You can only sign up a year in advance. So people sign up even before they get engaged, sort of on spec. And gay couples were, once it became possible for gay people to get married in several different faiths or legalities, they wanted to be able to do it too. The opposition was arguing that Duke is a Methodist institution, which is true, Methodist sponsored and by history, and that the Methodist Church had just recently then decided that gay marriage would not be performed by Methodist clergy or in Methodist churches. So that was a tough decision. I worked with the chaplain, but in the end, it was my decision. And the alternative view was it was a chapel for the whole university, not just a Methodist church. And therefore, in my view, it was a place where everyone who wanted to get married, faculty, students, ought to be able to get married. So the lesson I want to draw from this, however, is how important it is to think through the effects of a controversial decision and try to pave the way for it. I knew that there would be opposition from members of the church in some sessions. We had 2 bishops on our board. So the first thing I did was to call each of the Methodist bishops and tell them what I planned to do. And one of them said, I think it's the wrong decision, but it's yours and I'll back you. And the other one said, I understand why you're doing it, So that's good. And I knew the first thing that would happen would be that the Durham paper would call the bishops and ask them what they thought when we announced the decision, which they did. And the bishops were able to say that what they said to me on the phone. I also called some of the major donors who I knew would probably be very upset about this. And most of them were okay with it. A couple were not, but they basically at least had to listen to why I made the decision. And in the long run, I think it's all worked out. And so I'm very glad we did it. Even if it hadn't worked out as smoothly as it did, it was the right decision, so it was a good one that we made it.
Yeah.
Great, great story. So what came to my mind was not so much that it was unpopular, but it was risky, and it was a rookie moment. I was brand new in the presidency. I had inherited a wonderful dean from NAN, a woman named Nancy Keohane, and it was only her second year as dean. Fabulous Nancy. And she was bound and determined to rally her faculty, the Wellesley faculty, in a complete and thorough review of the curriculum. She was so determined to do that during the presidential search process, I found out later, she asked every candidate how they felt about reviewing the curriculum. You sort of knew when you heard the question what the answer should be. Good idea, Nancy. So I decided to back her on that, and quite thoroughly back her on that. So I would meet with her and her dean, associate deans, every week, and we'd go over it and we'd think strategically. I would preside over the academic council, which is where you're being judged by the whole faculty, especially when you're brand new. Who is this one? Well, she certainly isn't Nan Keohane. Right, which is what you get, by the way, as a new leader. Who is she anyway? And so I'd be presiding, but immediately I would turn it over to Nancy and say, well, now here's the review of the curriculum, let's get on with it. And then I would go to the trustees and I would give them a little précis of where it was going, and it was really not going anywhere for a very long time. It was very, very hard. And I started to hear rumblings that the deans are running the college. So it was this sort of, who is this person? Well, we could just kind of discount her. So that was a little unnerving. That was a little worrisome. And then this was all during the fall and the winter. And my inauguration had been planned for April in the hope and expectation that we could have a beautiful day. It actually rained that day. So, and at my inauguration, the plan was that the chair of the board would give me 3 items that were symbols of the leadership of the college. And since I was then immediately going to give my inaugural address, stand up and give my address, the deal was Nancy would be there she was going to be there on the stage anyway. I'd take them from Gail and I'd hand them to Nancy, because she would hold them for me for a little while. So Gail Clapper gave me the Articles of Government, I think, the first symbol, and I handed them to Nancy. And the faculty were sitting, as you are, sort of right in front of me. The second one came along. It was the charter of the college. I looked at it and handed it to Nancy, and I saw that something was happening in the faculty. There was this little laughter going on. So then came the third item, and it was the keys to the college, the beautiful keys to the college in a whole shadow box. And I, of course, was wearing my big academic gown. And Gail gave it to me, and I tucked it under my sleeve. And Nancy was going, and I stepped up to the podium, and I gave my inaugural address, which I had worked very hard on, and it was a good address. And after that, it felt like I was running the college.
Okay. All right.
Paula, I'm sorry you have to top that, but please.
I don't think I can, but I was no Diana Chapman Walsh or Nan Keohane, and the other thing I would just say is that did you give the whole speech with the box under your? You tucked it next. That is so. What you have been sharing just around the whole. What is shared governance? It is one of the areas of real challenge, and you must navigate it. And I think that was, we've all done that. And it does take a different lens on leadership to make decisions that you actually are responsible for, but you really have to have everyone on board in a way that will help move the college forward. So thank you for doing that. But I'll just give one because, again, not so highly controversial in my mind, but I think it was during a time, and these are the times that we were living in and have been living in, when there was a lot of cancellation of controversial speakers and of language, and it still goes on, but we've been working very, very hard on our campus to really move beyond, and I just talked a little bit about that athletic listening and what that means. But in 2021, so we're just coming out of the pandemic, the pro-life group on campus, the very small pro-life group on campus, wanted to bring a very controversial pro-life speaker to campus. And I was lobbied and served petitions by large numbers of students, by faculty, by staff, and by large numbers of alumni. And it was something that I knew that it was something that we could not do. I would not do this in terms of cancellation. But the enormous pressure, and that's surrounding the day-to-day work that you must get done, was quite intense. What I decided to do, though, was to really go to our college government president, who at the time was a phenomenal person. Figure these are young people, they're seniors, and I had a discussion with her about moving this talk forward. She agreed to work with me and really be the person in front of the students in college government, in Senate, to make the case as to why it was important that her classmates should be able to hear their speaker. And I am proud of that to this day. I got a lot of negative pushback. Thank you. It's our students. It's really our students. And that it was a difficult decision. It was difficult also for me because I did not want to put her in a position that was going to be harmful. We had taken some steps around that, but it really turned out to be the best possible outcome. And we worked with our Office for Religious and Spiritual Life, which, as we all know, is very important on campus. And the students had a silent vigil against the speaker, but it was a silent vigil. And we had the right, security, et cetera, for the talk. But what that did was it really showed me that the work that we had to do on our campus around intensely listening, being able to sit with discomfort, being able, again, to understand different perspectives when they are deeply disturbing, was work that had to take priority. And it has been a priority on the campus. And today, there is programming, everything from the Hillary Rodham Clinton Center to the Pluralism Initiative to constructive dialogue training in our dorms, to a new curricular initiative called 4C, and I won't go into all of what that means, but how does this enter into the curriculum in a very structured way? So lots of work here, but this is the work of a strong liberal arts education.
Great. So we invited alumni to submit questions in advance. I'm going to read one. It says, no offense, but from the outside, the top job in higher ed institutions really doesn't look all that appealing. What does the talent pool look like to you? Where are the next generation of leaders like you today, and how are they preparing for what's ahead when they take their seats? Open to anyone. Okay. So who's the next Paula? Who's out there?
Since I'm the closest to it. You know, I think I get this question a lot. Oh, your job is so hard. Of course it's hard. And I say there's nothing that is worthwhile in life that is easy. So I think that school is hard. The work our students do is hard. So I think that hard does not mean bad. Hard means worthwhile. Hard means complex. Hard means facing challenges that we might not have expected to face. So I just want to say these are great jobs. They are jobs, no, they really are. They are jobs of hope. Higher education is the business of hope. It is hope for the future. And as we think about places where, you know, we are teaching our future citizens, leaders, where we are producing new knowledge, these are remarkable institutions that we need to be incredibly proud of. They are the center of our democracy. They have been the jewel in the crown of the United States. And we really have to embrace that. And so when I talk to young people, because I do have some faculty come to me and say, so what is this job about? Should I become a dean? Should I think, as I've really been thinking about it, I said, well, let's have some ongoing conversation because it's not for everybody. But for some people, it is really a phenomenal journey. And so I'm optimistic.
Okay, great.
Just a brief P.S. By the way, I should say, I'm trying to be concise. I'm too concise. One thing I did not say about the gay marriage issue, one of the first things I did was to talk to the trustees. I certainly could not surprise the trustees with that decision. And they were supportive. I was not asking them to make it formally, but I wanted them to know what I was doing. So that's important to university governance and college governance. In terms of the question that you asked, I would simply echo Paula's statement about how rewarding the job can be. Yes, it's hard. And there are ways in which it sometimes seems almost impossible to bring all the constituencies together or to deal with each constituency in a way that is appropriate. Faculty, students, townspeople, alumni, staff, parents, everybody has a stake. And knowing how to respond to each of them, perhaps in slightly different language, but dealing with their concerns. It's a tough job, but it is an extremely rewarding job because of all the dimensions that it brings. Think about being in charge, or at least nominally in charge. Nobody's really in charge of a college, but think about being at the helm of an institution like this and having the opportunity to be part of every bit of it in ways that you try to advance. So in terms of the way the question was asked, I think people are preparing by asking us, is this worth it? And then we say, you know, take some opportunities to get some experience that's relevant and think about it. And if you talk to people, and if they're even willing to ask the question, they're usually at a point where it's the right job for them. If they don't ever think about it, you don't go out and recruit them. But if they're considering it and thinking about it, they're most of the way.
Mm-hmm. And Alecia, your background is as a corporate lawyer, and that was and as well as a university trustee, among other things. So I welcome your thoughts on this.
I would just say that being the president of Mills College was the most difficult job in my career. It was also absolutely, bar none, the most rewarding. And I'd say, just to sum it up, the students made it the most rewarding. To watch those young women come to class day in and day out, to do what they did under the circumstances in which they were studying, and to do it in service of others. And to see them become extraordinary young women in the course of 4 short years, that was one of the most rewarding experiences of my career.
Great. Thank you. So I have a question for Nan and Diana. You've both spoken and written about how ill-prepared you were to be college presidents, something a man would never admit to. And you know, what were the biggest gaps in your knowledge and how did you overcome them? And I know you've written quite a bit about this in your book, but I welcome your thoughts, Diana and, Nan, on this. Yeah.
Right. So I received a phone call from the chair of the board. He wasn't the chair of the board. He was chair of the presidential search committee. His name was David Stone. We know him well, Galen Stone Tower. And he said, we're conducting a search, and your name has come up several times, and I wonder if you'd be willing to come by and talk to our search committee. And I demurred for a moment. I wasn't quite sure. And he then said to me, well, you know, your predecessor, the current president of Wellesley College came with a fairly steep learning curve, as she said and admitted when she'd arrived. She'd been leading a faculty but hadn't done the whole thing. And she's just finishing one of the most successful presidencies in the history of Wellesley College. So you got me into this. And then the next thing he said was, don't you think you owe it to your alma mater at least to come by for a chat? So I had a couple of meetings with the presidential search committee and kind of muddled through. But I had actually in my previous life, probably 5 years earlier, I'd had a fellowship from the Kellogg National Foundation, a leadership fellowship for 3 years. So I knew what kind of a leader I would like to be. This had been a sort of a boot camp in leadership for 3 years. And I also was conscious of the habits and practices that I would need to work on. So I set to working on those from the beginning, and I was very self-conscious about that, and I enlisted others in my process of learning. I'd sort of lay out something I was working on, say to a colleague, and ask that colleague to kind of give me feedback. And so I was learning as I went, and I was open about it, and I was seeking guidance and help from others around me who'd been here longer than I had. After a period of time, I got my sea legs, and I was fine. And then I was invited a lot to the Harvard Seminar for New Presidents, which they have every year, to speak about the presidency. And I would say something along those lines, and people would come up to me afterwards, and yes, it was almost always the men in the audience, and they'd say, weren't you afraid that you would undermine your authority by being open about the fact that you were looking for help and you had deficits that you were trying to fill and you were looking for guidance? And I was, and I was careful about how I did it, but I was doing it, and I would always say, and I believe, that that was a sign of strength, not weakness.
Well, I certainly agree that that was a sign of strength and not weakness. I was just saying a moment ago how people are becoming prepared by being department chairs, whatever. I had absolutely no preparation. I had never run anything. I was a happily, newly tenured associate professor at Stanford, period. I'd never been a department chair. I'd never been a dean or a provost, anything. And so that was a really odd thing that they would come and ask me to be considered being a president. I thought, okay, this is never going to happen. So I was willing to talk to them in order to tell them what I thought Wellesley ought to be doing, because we were at a time when a lot of our peers were thinking about going co-ed, and some of them had done it, and Wellesley had not, which I thought was exactly the right answer, and I wanted to reinforce how I felt about it and say, this is now the way in which we should use that position in this time of second wave feminism at its height. Take Wellesley's history as a feminist institution and run with it, and that's what we ought to be doing as a college. Well, I thought they would say, thank you very much, go home. But they actually said, in the end, we agree with you, will you come and do it? And so, those were not exactly those words, but they're words, but they did invite me. But in terms of what I did to learn, I very much like Diana, I reached out to people that I worked with. For example, I had some really experienced and thoughtful members of my senior staff who let me know that I was running my staff meetings like a faculty seminar, because that's what I knew how to do. And at the end, I would say, thank you very much, and they would go, wait a minute, who's supposed to do what? Where do we go from here? And I had to learn about managing people. I'd never been managed. Faculty members don't get managed. But I learned how to be a manager with the help from my colleagues and through experience. As you say, I made a number of rookie mistakes, but I got through it, and I never found personnel issues as easy as some of the other things. There were many things that were hard and others that were very rewarding and came easily. So you may ask, so why did I take the job? I don't know why they asked me, but I know why I took it, because I found when I came back for a job interview on a November afternoon, and the lake was there, and the lights were on in the chapel, and I went in the chapel before the interview just to get my bearings, and the same guy, William Herman, who'd been my choir director, was still there. His hair was gray, but he was directing the choir, and it was so beautiful. And I realized how much I loved Wellesley. I had not realized it until that time. And so that was the main reason I said yes. I loved Wellesley. I cared about the mission of the college and the rightness at the time. And despite my joke a moment ago about nobody being in charge, I also took the job partly because I'm a political scientist who's interested in power. And I wanted to know what it felt like to have power. So that's why.
Okay. Yeah. I can think of no better way to end this panel. Thank you so much to the panelists. Thank you all for listening. Thank you.